live, sorry, and then I'll share your screen. 1 second.
Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is something which I suppose is somewhat controversial, but it's a different characteristics of people. And I need to be able to share my screen. I still can't share my screen. Oh, now I can. So if you're going to see it, it's some interesting characteristics, and you see these are exactly what Hillel lived up to be, and what he would want us to live, how he would want us to live our lives. Hillel goes down as, without a doubt, one of the great sages, and particularly of the time of the Mishnah. But this, could you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll go through some of the beginning parts. He says, who's who? It's Hillel. We're still talking about Hillel. Hillel is the most mentioned, or his statements are the most mentioned in Pirkei Avot. Obviously, he loves talking about how people should behave and teaching people ethics and the right morals. So he would say, Ein bur yirei chet. A bur cannot be a sin-fearing person. Now, who is a bur? What's a bur? A bur is generally, we talk about, it's like it's a person who is like a glutton. He is unsophisticated.
Yeah.
But he's not.
It's the same in English.
There is no translation in English. Could you see they don't even translate? He's like an uncivilized, wild, unorganized, type of sloppy person who kind of just, it's almost like he's animalistic and just goes based on his animalistic drives. What's the right word? He's almost like a hooligan. Perhaps the hooligan is the right word. So he's trying to tell us that, you'll see he used the word aim. Says
Rabbi,
such a position, yeah.
The English word boor, B-O-O-R, is an unrefined, ill-mannered person. And an example of a sentence is, at least the big, obnoxious boor had been dealt a stunning blow for his uncouth and belligerent manner. So it is an English word. It's become an English word.
It's become an English word. I thought that they were translating. I didn't think that they were. I thought boer, the way you think, is like an Afrikaans word or something.
No, not at all. Not at all. And the synonyms are a lout, an oaf, a ruffian, a hooligan, a thug, a bully boy, a brawler, so that you get an idea.
Okay, good. So actually the translation is the Hebrew word.
English.
It's English. Boer. Okay, so we see that English got some words from Hebrew.
Absolutely.
That's a boer. He's just wild, uncivilized. Now, it's saying that if you're acting in such a way, there's no way that you're going to be sin-free, because basically these type of people, they don't care about anything, or at least they don't act like they care, and they just do whatever they feel like it. So then you can't be a yirei chet. You can't be someone that fears sin. So if you have these tendencies, what he's saying is that you could be the greatest scholar. It's not saying that you're not wise. You could have lots of knowledge. But if you're behaving in such a way, then you can't be a refined person. You can't be someone who fears sin. A person that fears sin is naturally not going to be wild and not going to be a hooligan and is going to be civilized and pleasant and kind, etc. Okay, so that's the first thing. When he says "V'lo am haaretz chassid," now the word "v'lo," some commentaries, the rest they're going to tell us, it's not, v'lo means it's not that it's impossible. Ein means it's impossible. You can't be uncivilized and also person. But v'lo means it's not impossible, but it's almost impossible. It's unlikely that you'll have an Amaretz to be a chassid. What's an Amaretz? An Amaretz is a person that doesn't know much Torah, that is somewhat ignorant in the ways of Torah. So it's saying if you're Amaretz and you don't know much, Amaretz literally means a man of the land or the people of the land, but it's an earthly person who's very much connected only to the physical and the here and now. So basically means that they don't have much knowledge. He says you can't be a chassid. Now, what's a chassid? The chassid is not the traditional way that we call chassid. We got the Hasidim from the time of the Baal Shem Tov. We're called Hasidim because the opposers, they said, oh, these people are always trying to go above and beyond the letter of the law. A Chassid is a person that goes beyond the letter of the law. Why can't such a person be a chassid? The reason why such a person can't go beyond the letter of the law is because they don't know the law. So it gives us an example of if you don't know the law, you don't know where to be more stringent and where to be, they don't know how to be more sophisticated and detailed about it. This could be a very refined person with beautiful characteristics. But they won't go beyond the letter of the law. A chassid is somebody that always tries to make sure that he's extra stringent and finds it. But you can't just be stringent in places that it's no point in being stringent. You know, you'll have some people that will wash their hands 25 times before they start services, or they'll go in the mikveh 5 times a day, and then they'll each time they go in the mikveh they'll do 150 dips. That's not being a chassid. That's being stupid and wasting your time. That's being so. He's saying, if you want to know where to be strict, where to go beyond the letter of the law, then you have to have an understanding. There's an example that they give that a chassid is in a way certain higher than a tzaddik. There's a concept in Jewish law that we're careful with our nails, the nails that go on our toes and our fingers. Why are we careful with them? Because they're a part of the person. So it says a tzaddik is a person that does the right thing. He's a righteous person. So he takes his nails after he cuts them and he buries them. Because he doesn't want, because nails, according to Kabbalah, could cause harm to people if they're left around. However, a chassid won't suffice with burying, because burying means they still exist and they could still come up and cause harm. But the chassid will actually burn the nails, and then they have no way of causing anything. It's interesting. It's the one part of the body that otherwise usually you're supposed to bury your body. But the nails, because they're actually harmful, we're told that there's negative forces that reside on the nails, because in the nail, the Hebrew word for nail is a klippa, a shell, which is a husk. And anyway, it's a discussion for another time. But that's an example where chassid goes beyond that. But a somebody that's not knowledgeable wouldn't know these type of things, wouldn't have an understanding in where to be stringent. So if you want to go beyond the letter of the law, the first thing he says is stop being an Amaretz. You have to actually study. Now, the next two things are I suppose, somewhat logical, sensical things, but less. But we don't think about them possibly as much. He says, "Loya baishin loimet." A person that is bashful, if you're embarrassed, you're not going to be able to learn. And the basic understanding of this is, if you want to be able to study Torah properly, you have to constantly be growing in your Torah. I'm going to quickly finish the halacha, and then I'll mention a few more things. Below hakapton melamed, and somebody who's short-tempered won't be able to teach. Below chalamarba b'schara makim, and not anybody that adds in business is going to become wiser. Of a makim she'ena noshim mishtarul yos ish. If there's no other people, then make sure that you yourself will be a man. So let's look. I'm going to stop sharing. I want to talk about loya baishin. The bashful doesn't learn. What does it mean, a bashful? Hey, Joe, welcome. Joining our small shir today. So the bashful doesn't learn is that it's basically telling us if you're afraid to ask questions, then you're not going to be you'll never be able to clarify what it is that the teacher's saying. You won't be able to have a good understanding of what's going on. And everything, you'll always remain in doubt. If you have a question, you're too embarrassed to ask it. You don't want to look foolish. You'll make a fool out of yourself. So the best way, people that want to learn, they have to be willing to put themselves at risk of possible embarrassment in order to actually learn. And this is really important, because if you look at the next one, he says this: if you're going to be short-tempered, you won't be able to teach. Somebody that gets always angry. Why? Because if your students are always afraid of you and that you get angry at them the moment they say something wrong, or then they're never going to ask a question, and you're going to cause them not to ask questions, which will make sure they won't learn. Not only that, there's a famous concept that says that anger makes people forgetful. And one of the most important things for a teacher to do is to allow questions and ask for repetition. Because if you don't do that, you have no idea if you have properly transferred the information and if your students are actually understanding what you're doing.
Right.
So if you don't have patience, the most important element in teaching is patience. If there's one trait that you need in order to be a good teacher, is the ability to have patience. And to say, I'm not going to just go on because I want to go on. Furthermore, if somebody that doesn't have patience and they're angry easily, nobody wants to learn from that type of person. There's a brilliant story in the Talmud, in Tractate Eruvin, of one of the rabbis by the name of Rav Preider, that he was so aware of this concept that he was trying to teach. He had a student that was very slow at really truly understanding things, and I suppose the student himself was also a very difficult student, but at the same time maybe also could have been a student that really struggled to understand but really wanted to. And the story is told in the Talmud that the student was learning from Rav Preider, and it took Rav Preider 400 times to teach him, and he would repeat everything in 400 different ways in order to help the student get it. And after the 400th time, somebody came and told Rav Preider, I need that he was required to go somewhere else. And Rav Preider said, no, I cannot go because I'm in the middle of teaching. And then he continued teaching. And the student, and he saw that his student wasn't getting. So he said, what's wrong? He said, ever since that person came to call you, when I saw your reaction that you had the patience, it made me lose concentration. So I haven't heard a word you're saying. And Rav Preider, with his humility and patience, stayed there another 400 times to explain it all over again, because he noticed that his student hadn't got it. And that's given an example of somebody that's willing to go to the very end, so to speak, of the world to teach his students. A real teacher is somebody that's willing to go down to the level and give it the patience that the student needs in order to make sure that he understands. Now, these statements are said by Hillel. So Hillel, when you think about it, who is Hillel? I want to just tell you 2 points about Leah Baish, not bashful. Hillel was somebody that we know, he was certainly not bashful, and he was willing to go to extremes to study. And he taught people to what extremes. We're told that Hillel came from a very poor background, and never had any money. And he would chop wood in the morning. And with that money, he was able to survive that day. He'd take the wood, half of it he would use for his own cost, and the other half, when he sold it, would go to pay for his entry into the Beth Medrash. And the one day, he didn't have the half coin, the half of his salary to pay for the entrance into the Beth Medrash, to pay the guard. And so he didn't want to miss. He was desperate to have the Torah, but he didn't have the money. It was a freezing cold wintry day. He was learning. His teachers was the great teachers, Shmai of Talion, the teachers of the generation. And he didn't want to miss, but they wouldn't let him inside the whole of the study hall. So what did he do? He climbed up onto the roof, and he heard through the skylight. But through the coldness and his concentration, he didn't realize it had gone so much colder and that he had actually passed out on the roof. The next morning, he was still lying there in the cold. And Shemaiah said to Avtalion that, wow, how come it's so dark? There's no light. It's morning and there's no light coming from the skylight until they looked up and they saw a human, and they went and they quickly saved Hillel. And that's when they realized the lengths that a person has to go to study. And talking about not having patience, Hillel is known as the person with the ultimate patience. The Talmud tells us a story, which I've said as well. I'll just say it quickly and short, how one time people made this bet that no one would ever be able to make Hillel get angry because no one had ever seen him lose his cool. Somebody said, had a bet with somebody else, 400 zuz, which was a huge amount, that I'll be able to make him lose his cool. It goes to when the busiest time of the week. What's that? Erev Shabbos, when he's having his bath. And as he hears Hillel's entered the bathhouse, he quickly goes and he calls Hillel and he says, and he asks him some silly question like, well, why do the Babylonians have round heads? And he says, oh, because the Babylonians don't have such good midwives. And then he did this every time. He waited for Hillel to go back, and then he'd call him out, back and forth. And a normal person would have got extremely angry at this person and say, listen, just, come back later. So he says, that eventually the person sees that there's no way of getting Hillel angry, and he said the person himself got extremely angry himself. So Hillel says, I see, my son, that you're very angry. Why are you so angry? What have I done wrong? I've answered all your questions. Is there something else I can help you with? To which he replies, because of you, I lost 400 zuz. And he tells him that he had a bet he'd be able to get somebody else angry. He'd be able to get Hillel angry. So Hillel said, I would rather lose 400 zuz and another 400 zuz, which is like tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's value, rather than get angry even once. So he tells us that Hillel becomes the ultimate teacher of the Jewish people because he has the patience. So that's the concept of never getting angry.
Rabbi, it's a very good parable, of course. There's a moral there, but Hillel was saying, he was talking about the other guy's money, yeah, not his own.
I don't understand. So Hillel was talking about the other guy's money, about why he should. Yeah, Hillel was telling him that I understand that you've lost $400, but 400 zuz. But he said, I would rather lose 400 zuz, double over 800 zuz, than lose my temper once. That's how important it is for me not to lose my cool.
But that's easy to say when you don't have 800 zuz.
Who said Hillel didn't have 800? Hillel became a wealthy man later on. This is when Hillel was a Nasi. That was later on. Hillel became a wealthy man. It's not the story of the Tsar's chicken, right? You're thinking of the story of the Tsar's chicken. It's not that story. This is not when Hillel was a poor man. This is when Hillel was already the famous Hillel and had already become the Nasi, became the leader of the Jewish people, and he certainly would have had plenty of money because that's the law. That's the Nasi wealthy. Okay, and going further, the next statement that it says over there in the Mishnah was, "Loi kol hamarba b'schora machkim." If you're going to have, and Hillel says, if you're trying to become wise, don't think you're going to become wise. If your goal is to become wise, then your mainstay has to be study of Torah, and secondary has to be making money. With Hillel, he needed to make money to survive. So what did he do? He worked for a couple of hours or whatever it was in the morning, and the rest of the time, what did he do? He spent his time studying. And that's how he became the great Hillel. But if you're going to spend most of your time being business, and that's your main thing, and then at the same time, you're going to try to become wealthy, you won't necessarily be able to do that. It's about what's primary about you, what's your main thing, and that's where you'll be successful. Yes, you can do other things on the side. But if your primary thing is to become wealthy, and secondary to that is to gain knowledge, then you will possibly become wealthy, but knowledge you won't gain. You won't become wise. Now, the last line is my favorite line of the Mishnah, and that is "B'makom she'ein ish hishtadel lios ish." When there's no, in the place where there's no man, then you have to try to become a man. Now, this has numerous meanings to it, and it's a famous statement, but it's teaching us, first of all, so some people say it's saying that if you generally we talk about in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, we should always try to find a mentor. But what happens if you can't find a mentor, or where the place you live, there's no one that's there to mentor you? Then find a way to mentor yourself, to be objective in your own dealings, and give yourself a true and honest answer. The other statement, which is it's saying the way I see it, is that sometimes you need to find, you see that something has to be done. You have this great idea, or there's something that's happening that's really bothering you, and you start complaining about it, or you have issues about it, and you see nobody's taking care of it. So instead of saying, hey, there's this issue and that issue, look, nobody's doing it. What a terrible community, what a terrible family. You've got an issue, take care of it yourself. B'makom she'ein ish, there's no man, you be the man. You take care of the issue. Don't wait for other people to take care of your issues. There's issues in the world, you be the one to fix up those issues. Don't sit there complaining about them. That's b'makom she'ein ish. Another thing is when you see that other people are going in false and unpleasant ways, then you have to be the one to be the ish, to stand up for the truth. Stand up for what you think is right. Don't just be a bystander and let things go on. You see that other people are doing wrong. B'makom she'ein ish. There's no other man. You be the mish. You be the man. There's no other man there. You have a responsibility to be the leader. You see there's no leadership. So why don't you stand up and take leadership role? Why don't you make things happen? But why don't you stand up for the truth? It's about standing up for the truth. And here's a little bit of a subtle, a different way of looking into it. B'makom she'ein ish. If you're in a place when there's no other people, there you should be a man. Where's the place when there's no other people? Behind closed doors. Sometimes we think that behind closed doors, no one's looking, I could do whatever I want. There's no one here. So what does it say? Where's the most important place to be on your best behavior? Where nobody else is watching. B'makom she'ein ish. There's nobody there. You want to know if you're a good man? How are you behind closed doors when nobody else is watching? Okay. And one final interpretation to this statement is that sometimes we think, well, I'm good. I've reached a type of point in my life that I've kind of reached a climax. This is where I'm happy to reach. He says, no. Even if you're even the greatest person and there was no one that was greater than you, don't be fooled. You got to keep on growing. Because people that are not continuously growing, continuously learning, joining shiurim or constantly giving back to the community, etc., then you know what happens? They're going down. There's no such thing as a plateau. Plateaued means that you're going downhill. You stand still, it only goes down. So b'makom she'ein ish, now it's time to continue growing. You could never reach a level and say stop it, because if you stop, ultimately you've got to continuously learn and gain and find ways to grow, even if it's maybe not in as big strides that you have done in the past. But if you're not growing some way, then ultimately you will be going in the wrong direction. Okay, so with that little message, I would like to officially conclude today's shiur. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. No? All good?
No.
Okay,
All good.
have a great day. Who's
Thanks,
that?
Rob.
David? Did David join? Wow.